Do you know what all these charts and graphs have in common? Well, besides the fact that they all have numbers on them, and they're kind of fun to look at, they're all used to represent data visually. That means we can look at the data a bit more easily and possibly even spot any interesting patterns. We can also interpret the data on the charts and graphs to find the mean, median, mode, and range, which are each used to represent a data set or group of numbers with just one value. Let's try it together. This horizontal bar graph shows us how many pages Ryan read in his book each weekday. The length of the bars indicate how many pages he read each day. Ryan read 14 pages on Monday, 11 pages on Tuesday, 14 pages on Wednesday, 13 pages on Thursday, and 8 pages on Friday. Let's start with calculating the mean of this data set. Mean is the same as the average, and in this example, it gives us an idea of how many pages Ryan might read in a typical day. To find the average, we add all the values in the data set and divide the sum by the number of values in the data set. 14 plus 11 plus 14 plus 13 plus 8 gives us a sum of 60. Then, we divide 60 by 5 because there are 5 values in the data set, one value each for 5 days. 60 divided by 5 is 12, so the mean number of pages read is 12 pages. Now that we know how to calculate the mean, let's talk about the median. We can think about the median as the middle of a data set. To find the median, we put all the values in the data set in order from least to greatest. The number in the middle is the median. We can cross off one number from each side of the list until only the middle number is remaining. 13 is our median. Notice that half the values in the data set are below the median and half of the values are above the median. Sometimes there's more than one number in the middle, but we'll look at how to tackle that with another example later in this video. Let's move on to mode now. Mode means most. In other words, mode is just the number that appears the most in the data set. If we look at the data set of pages read each day, most of the numbers appear only once. However, if we examine the data set closely, you'll see that the number 14 is listed twice. This makes 14 the mode. Be careful though, sometimes a data set can have more than one mode or even no mode at all. Be on the lookout. We'll see an example like that later. Finally, one other way to examine a data set is by determining its range. The range is useful for examining how the data is spread out. To find the range, you find the difference between the smallest value and the greatest value in the data set. This means that for this data set, we subtract the smallest value, 8, from the greatest value, 14. This gives us a range of 6 pages. Now, let's practice calculating mean, median, mode, and range by interpreting data from a couple more graphs. We'll start with a line graph. Line graphs often show how data changes over time. This line graph represents the number of hours Kaylee spent practicing basketball during several months of the year. Lines going upward show an increase in the hours Kaylee spent practicing between 2 months, and lines going downward show a decrease in the hours she spent practicing between 2 months. We can determine the number of hours Kaylee practiced each month by locating the number of hours on the vertical axis that lines up with the point for a particular month. She practiced 20 hours in March, 50 in April, 25 in May, 55 in June, 40 in July, and 50 in August. We'll start with finding the mean by adding the numbers in the data set and dividing by the number of values. 20 plus 50 plus 25 plus 55 plus 40 plus 50 equals 240. We then divide 240 by 6 because there are 6 values. This gives us a mean of 40 hours. Now, to find the median, let's put the numbers in order from least to greatest. We can cross off one number from each side to find the number in the middle. But look, this one actually has 2 numbers in the middle. When this happens, we calculate the mean of those 2 numbers. In other words, we add them together and divide the sum by 2. This gives us a median of 45 hours. For mode, we need to find the number that appears the most in the data set. In this data set, the mode is 50 because it's listed twice, while the other numbers are only listed once. We can't forget to find the range by subtracting the smallest number from the greatest number in the dataset. 55 minus 20 gives us a range of 35 hours. Let's try one more example together. This time we have a line plot to interpret. Line plots show data on a number line, and an X or a dot is used to plot values each time they appear in the dataset. This particular line plot shows us the number of candy bars sold by students for a school fundraiser. Each X represents one student who sold the number of candy bars shown on the number line. For example, this X shows us that one student sold 25 candy bars. You might be noticing that some values on the number line have more than one X, like with 10 candy bars. Since there are two X's above 10 candy bars, that tells us there were 2 students who sold 10 candy bars. When there are no X's above a number, like with 20, that means no students sold that number of candy bars. Now, let's use the data on the line plot to find mean, median, mode, and range. We'll start with finding the mean. It's important to make sure we include one value for every X on the line plot. Remember, to find the mean, we need to add the values together and divide by the number of values. We get a sum of 180, and 180 divided by 9, because there are 9 values, equals 20. The mean is 20 candy bars. Next is the median, and just like with the mean, we need to include all of the values from the line plot. First, put the values in order, then find the value in the middle. The median is 15 candy bars. Now we'll try to find the mode. Do you see anything different about this data set? If you noticed that both 15 and 30 appear 3 times in the data set, while the other numbers only appear once or twice, you've got a great eye. Because both 15 and 30 are listed 3 times, that means this data set has 2 modes, 15 and 30. Finally, let's calculate the range. Subtract the smallest value from the largest value. The largest number of candy bars sold is 30, and the smallest number of candy bars sold is 10. 30 minus 10 is 20, so the range is 20 candy bars. Wow! So now that you're an expert on interpreting charts and graphs to find mean, median, mode, and range, go use that newly acquired knowledge to practice on your own. I know you'll knock it out of the park.